And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there's the wild man, Chris Wilds. He's so cool, he's got to wear shades at night. You know who else is not cool?
Who's that?
Mike Locksley. He's not a cool guy.
Not a cool guy.
No, this is our Maryland preview. And I shouldn't have said that. That's probably pretty rude of me to say. A lot of Maryland people are not going to like that who are going to watch this preview. But I think Maryland is going to have a rough year. Let's just say it like that. I think that Maryland, without Talia Tagovailoa, without returning any offensive linemen from last year, Maryland is going to be in for it this year, Chris. And so before we jump in and take a deep dive into all of that, what are your 2 cents about Maryland before we just dive into the weeds here?
They were a team that, with Talia, I think was going in the right direction. They are a team right now, I think, that is going to be hard pressed to be bowl eligible at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's see. Let's take a little bit look of Adam historically and what they did last year to kind of gauge where we might think they might be this year. In 2023, last year they started the season off hot, 5-0, wins over Townsend, Charlotte, Virginia, Michigan State, and Indiana. That's when they came into Columbus in what was a big game, Chris, and Ohio State, after a rough start, pulled away 37-17. That sent them on a 4-game losing streak. Illinois, Northwestern, Penn State, and they might have even taken an L against that team called Bye Week if they were keeping score. Then they somehow defeated Nebraska at Nebraska and Lincoln 13-10 before losing to the team up north by only 7, 31-24. Then they rounded out the year with 2 more victories at 42-24 over Rutgers and 31-13 against Auburn in their bowl game. They finished the regular season 8-4. They finished the regular season last year 7-5. We thought they would go 8-4. We were just one off, Chris, in our predictions. Of course, Vegas had them at 7 wins, so we did not win money on them. However, as I recall, I didn't bet on Maryland because I thought that line was just way too close to where I thought they were going to be. So overall, they were 8-5, 4-5 in the Big Ten last year. Mike Locksley now runs his overall record at 29-33. And as you can see, some of the statistics there. Of course, they play their ball in College Park, Maryland, at SECU Stadium with a capacity of 51,802. The all-time record there in Maryland is 685 wins, the 636 losses, 43 ties. They have a really nice bowl record though, 14-14-2. It's one of the better ones in the Big Ten, and they do have 11 conference records, albeit 11 conference titles. Albeit none of them were in the actual Big Ten Conference where they now reside and play, Chris. So taking a little look backwards at Maryland, they had that rough stretch. They did end well, and there was a lot of hope coming off that big win over Auburn that this is a team that is moving in the right direction. However, they lost a lot.
Yeah, they've just lost too much to be a quality team, I think, this season. But you know what? I think this is a good season for Mike Locksley to show what he and his team are made of. If they can go out and even be competitive, if they can get to where they can compete in a bowl, I think that says a lot about Locksley and his program. Because when you lose one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, when you lose your entire starting line, when you lose your best receiver from last season, that's a whole lot to lose.
Mm-hmm.
If you can go out and still be competitive, I think it says a lot about what Mike Locksley's capable of. But at the same time, if you look at Mike Locksley even before he got to Maryland, the record was not overly impressive.
No, but it's one thing to not do it out west at like Nevada or wherever he was at.
Yeah.
It's another thing to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama. And so
Yeah.
he does have a little bit of a track record here, and he is doing a decent job recruiting currently. So,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to bring on Michael and Sam from the Under the Shell podcast and the Maryland School newspaper to talk about their team and about their school, get a little bit more in-depth from those who would know them a little better than Chris and I. We will be right back after this interview. And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everybody. As you can see, I'm joined by our two special guests, Michael and Sam. They are with the Maryland School Newspaper, and they run Under the Shell podcast, which I have listened to and enjoy immensely. And these guys are our special guests today to talk a little bit of Maryland football. Michael and Sam, welcome to the OHIO podcast.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, man, Ohio State and Maryland don't play this year, but the Buckeyes, we know, we've seen it the past couple of years. They've had some great games with the Terps, so excited to come on it and talk with you.
I'm still shaking from, I believe it was 2019's last second game. You guys were probably in what, like high school back then, like freshmen in high school or something? So, yeah, I'm still having nightmares about that game. But anyways, we're glad to have you here to talk a little bit Maryland football with us here at the OHIO podcast and the Ohio State affiliate of the College Huddle. Boys, let's talk a little bit. Let's start here. What are the major storylines as we prepare for 2024 for the Terps? Michael, I'll start with you.
I think the biggest one is who's going to replace Taulia at QB, all-time leading passer in Big Ten history, and it's really going to come down to three candidates for Maryland: Billy Edwards, Cam Edge, and MJ Morris. Billy's kind of like the incumbent in this race. He made a couple spot starts when Taulia was injured, started the Music City Bowl last year, was MVP of that game. His rushing ability, that's his biggest trait right there. That's what people are going to look at, but there are questions about his arm. And then you got Cam Edge on the flip side. He can throw the ball. He was 4 for 6 last year, 82 yards and a touchdown in that bowl game against Auburn. But that was really the most Maryland fans had ever seen from him, other than a quick little appearance against Towson early in the season. And then lastly is MJ Morris, the NC State transfer, was the spring game MVP in 2024. And at NC State, he was the first true freshman to start for the Wolfpack since Phillip Rivers and held a 5-3 record as the starter. So if I had to put my money on it, I'd say Billy Edwards likely the starter just because he has that experience, but it's still really up in the air for Maryland.
Sam, I see you nodding your head. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think everything that Mike said checks out. This team's identity since Mike Loxley's tenure has been Taulia Tagovailoa.
Right.
Everything has revolved around him. Everything's revolved around that offense that he's led. And I think, the downfalls of Taulia were not winning big games, right? We've seen it with games like Ohio State. Maryland's come close, but they have not been able to.
Sam appears to be frozen in time, Michael. I'm going to kick it back to you real fast, Michael, see if Sam can find his internet there. What are some other storylines that we need to be aware of?
The defense. The defense is really going to be the part of the team that's taken the charge this year. A big difference from past seasons where obviously that offense was leading the charge with Taulia at QB. But now when Talia's not there, have some returners on that defense. You're going to see them kind of take the spotlight away from the offense, which probably is going to struggle at times this year with a lack of cohesiveness with a brand new O-line and obviously a different quarterback.
Right. Okay, so outside of, I think it might have been you, it might have been Sam, I don't know sure which one we mentioned about the identity of the team being Taulia. What will the new identity of this team look like, in your opinion?
It's going to be probably running game centric. You got Roman Hemby coming back. You're also going to have senior Colby McDonald, who's going to be the number 2 behind Hemby. Had limited time last year, but averaged 5 yards a carry in 2 of his past 3 seasons. So it's going to be a real big running threat. And then obviously brought in Brian Ferentz from Iowa. You know how that offense plays. So if they have Billy there behind QB, it's going to be a real run and pound the ball type of offense.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look a little bit about guys who lost. You guys have mentioned Taulia a couple times now. What were some of the other big losses, and who are some of the names that were brought in as replacements or guys who are coming up the system that we should be aware of?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple names on the defense that, a lot of listeners might know. Bo Braid was an undrafted free agent for the Ravens. He was a captain last year for Maryland, 2023-2022 honorable mention for the Big Ten, led the team in tackles for the past 2 seasons. We also have Tarheeb Still in that secondary, was second team All Big Ten last year, 6th most interceptions nationally with 5 last season, was a 5th-round pick for the Chargers. Obviously, Talia. Then you're going to have tight end Corey Dyches. He transferred to California, caught 490 yards, over 490 the past 2 years, had 49 catches in 2023. And then the top 5 offensive linemen are all gone from Maryland, including DJ Glaze, who was a 3rd-round draft pick. So Mike Locksley did do some work in the portal, brought in 4 linemen to kind of patch up those holes, but kind of that lack of cohesiveness has got to be a little concerning for Maryland on that offensive line, especially like I've been saying, that new quarterback situation, not what you want to have when, your O-line's a little bit patched up.
Yeah, trust me, Ohio State fans know all too well about trying to patch holes on an offensive line and that not going so well for you, especially when you have the rest of the roster looking incredibly well. Speaking of Mike Locksley and what he has done, what is the pulse of the fan base when it comes to him? Is he pretty, like, there's no whispers or anything about not meeting expectations? Like, he's good.
Absolutely. There was a few
Okay.
games last year that they dropped that fans were a little upset about, mainly Illinois, Northwestern in that 2-week span. But to have him, the consistency that the team has had after the past 2 previous head coaches, after firing Ralph Friedgen, fan base is more than happy with Coach Locks and the direction that it's headed. Not to talk too much about the future, but the Terps have been on the recruiting trail quite a bit this offseason.
Yes, they have.
Mike Locksley's building quite the class for 2025, which includes Malik Washington, who's a top QB prospect in the nation. And you kind of see Locksley going more towards local recruits, building that base back up. And it's the type of stuff Maryland fans like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. You got one of the hotter regions of the country in the DMV to recruit from, and that's typically where people like Clemson, Pennsylvania, Penn State, Ohio State's gone in there, dipped their toe in there from time to time, getting some guys out of there. Chase Young, obviously a big name, wrecking offenses in the NFL right now out of the DMV. So yeah, it only makes sense that Locks would take advantage of what's in his backyard. Easier said than done when you have teams like Clemson, Penn State, and Ohio State coming in knocking on the door, that have the resume that he doesn't have necessarily in the hometown. But you get a few guys who take the hometown discount, and dominoes can start to fall that way. And we saw last year that they had plenty of momentum going into that big game against Ohio State, and actually played pretty well in the first half before things kind of got away from them in the second half and got out of control. But that was a big game. And so obviously bringing some of these new guys in is going to be critical to see how the Terps can kind of turn the page from what they had last year and moving forward. Now, that being said, you've mentioned some of the guys on this roster. If you could circle, here's our team captains, here's the face for this year's team. And Sam, I'll kick it back to you since we got you back now, Sam. Let me throw you back up on here real fast. I gotta readjust your frame rate here. But who do you think, Sam, will be the captains and leaders of Maryland this year in 2024? And we lost him again just as fast as we had him back. Having some internet issues out there. I don't know what part of Maryland Sam's from, but internet not good there, Michael. How about you answering that question, man?
He's actually in Michigan right now, believe it.
Oh, that makes all the sense in the world then. Yeah, it's just how it goes, man. That's the world that we live in. All right, Sam. Who are the faces of this team in 2024? Captains, guys you're counting on. Who do you think?
Well, yeah, I think that Mike touched on it earlier. I think Billy Edwards is poised to take a really big leap and become somebody that Big Ten fans come to find out about. He transferred from Wake Forest. I think he's a name to pay attention to. I think Roman Hemby is poised. A lot of talk about Quadshawn. I want to make sure I get it right. Is it Quadshawn Jenkins and Henderson over at Ohio State?
Quinshon Judkins.
Quinshon
Judkins. You got it.
However you pronounce his name, he is that guy. Donovan Edwards at Michigan. But I think Roman Hemby has a chance to really kind of announce himself to the stage as one of the Big Ten's best backs. He's had really nice seasons the past 2 years, and I think Loxley will especially lean on the running game this year with Talia exiting. And then beyond him, the receivers. I mean, Maryland always has receiving talent. I feel like them and Ohio State are usually right at the top of the Big Ten. So Caden Pratherb, Ty Felton, those are two guys to really watch out for. And then quickly on the defensive side, lost a lot of names, but an underrated player, I think, that will be making names on draft boards come next offseason is Jordan Phillips, defensive lineman, recently made Bruce Feldman's he does that series on the freaks of college football. He was right up there. Loxley expects big things. Interior pass rusher, but can also stop the run. I think he's a really, really, literally a big name for people to watch out for. I think he's going to have a monster season right up there in the middle. So those are some names to pay attention to. But if you had to single out a couple, I would say Hemby and Phillips are poised for big years.
Michael, any additional names, or do you agree with that list?
I agree with that. I also want to add Ruben Hippolyte on defense too. He's going to be back for his 5th year. Linebacker, had 47 solo tackles last year. Going to be a big part of that defense, and kind of trying to be the spotlight of the team away from the offense.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to put you guys on the spot here, and Sam, I'll go back to you first here. What do you think the strength, and what do you think? I'll leave you. I'll ask you first, and then Michael, I'll go to you second. So Sam, what's the strength going to be of this team in 2024? And then Michael, you can answer what you think the weakness of this team will be.
So I think their rush defense and rush offense is gonna be good. I think that Maryland's offense has traditionally been pass heavy, but Hemby is a really strong back. Colby McDonald coming in as the backup back, and then quarterback run. I mean, for years you saw it with JT Barrett at Ohio State. You could make a living in the Big Ten with just a strong QB run game, QB power, those type of things. I expect that rushing game to be pretty potent early on, at least. And then defensively, I think the run defense will be a strength. Mike mentioned Hippolyte. He's a really good run defender. Phillips is strong. And, their defense has been improving over recent years. I think that, ever since Loxley has kind of turned the defensive side of the ball over to the defensive coordinator and gone hands off, they've really improved on that side of the ball. And I think that will continue this year with a lot of names exiting in the secondary. I think that the defensive line and linebackers will be a strong trenches unit for them. So those are the two strengths I think Maryland will really have this season.
All right, Michael, time to be the Debbie Downer. What's the weakness going to be for the Terrapins?
Unfortunately, it might be quarterback play. There's just a lot of question marks at that position still. Really unclear who it's going to be, even though it seems like Billy Edwards is the front runner. He hasn't started a full season for Maryland. He didn't start a full season at Wake Forest. And then you couple that with the offensive line. They added 4 new guys. Isaiah Wright from Buffalo. Seems like he's likely out for the season with a lower leg injury. So there's already issues there when you're trying to patch up an O-line. Just doesn't seem like a smart recipe.
Yeah. I want to add, real quick. I think the offensive line is going to be the biggest issue with this team. I think, transfer offensive linemen is a great idea, right? We saw it with Deion Sanders, who talked about, we just need to fill the portal with offensive linemen. But good offensive linemen don't make it to the portal very often. Correct. And I think that this team losing all 5 starters from last year's unit, that was surprisingly one of the best in the Big Ten in pass blocking especially, this team could struggle early on, especially in the trenches, especially with a new quarterback. And a new quarterback and a new offensive line tends to be a recipe for disaster. So I think that if that does not, figure itself out early on, it could be a tough year for the Terps.
All right, so Sam, with your concern of what it might look like early on in the season, let's take a quick look at your schedule and come up with a ceiling and floor for Maryland this year. You start off at home against UConn. If this was a basketball game, I would say get your popcorn and pull up tight. This is going to be a lot of fun. But it's not. It's football, and so I think Maryland should probably get a win here. And then we're going to skip Michigan State for a second and talk about the next 2 non-con games on the road at a Virginia team that is trending upward, and then home against another team that should be a W, again, another basketball school in Villanova. I love the schedule if it's basketball. Football, not so much. What do you guys think? 2-1 in the non-con?
I think 3-0. I
Oh,
think
okay. You
I
guys
think
think you could? I know it's a little bit of a rivalry from back in the day.
yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, they're basically just taking all the old basketball rivalries here: UConn, Virginia, Villanova, and I
Oh,
think that I think they're going to fare
there we
well.
go again. All right, we missed you there for a second. I got you. All right, Michael, what do you think?
I think there's a good chance that they not only go 3-0 in non-con, but they can start the season 6-0 before they face
Whoa!
USC.
Woo! Michael, he is really high on the Terps beginning of the season. All right, 6-0. Between UConn and Virginia, you do have the home game against Michigan State. This is a Michigan State team with a brand new coaching staff. Understand that. On the road at Indiana, again, new coaching staff. Indiana is what we're calling the Group of Five All-Star team here on the OHIO podcast. They literally have taken every good guy from the G5, from James Madison and some of the other ones, and brought them over to Indiana. So we're going to find out if a G5 All-Star team can compete in the Big Ten in the form of Indiana. And then you also host Northwestern at home. And Northwestern, I think, is going to return a little bit to reality this year. Braum had a great, miraculous first year. And I've been saying that he gets 6 wins again at Northwestern without a home field, going back and forth from playing on the lake to Wrigley Field in Chicago. He gets 6 wins. That guy's not going to be in Northwestern very long. That guy's going to be at an SEC school. He's going to be at a bigger Big Ten school. But I agree with Michael, those are 6 winnable games. I don't think you're going to win them all, but they are 6 winnable games. Why do you think Maryland gets bowl eligible in 6 games to start the season off?
It's probably the lightest part of their schedule.
True.
It's a good way to start the year against that light schedule. I mean, we've seen this before with the team. They usually start off pretty strong too, and then once they start facing those tougher conference opponents, some of those issues start to arise. So I tend to look at the past and, maybe they follow that pattern this year. But like you said, there's a chance they don't win all of those games. There was games last year they should have won. Illinois at home, away at Northwestern. Those were winnable games that the Terps dropped, and that's another concerning pattern.
Sam, what do you think in those first 6, man? Are you as optimistic as your boy Michael there?
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on this. It is a very, very important game against Michigan State is what I'll say. I think that is a huge swing game because if Maryland wins that, you have a little bit of juice beating Michigan State, like you said, new coach Jonathan Smith, but also a very talented quarterback in Childs. They win that game, you start to get some momentum. I'm lower on Virginia, Indiana, and Northwestern. I tend to agree. I think that all 3 of those teams are going to have tough years. But Mike is right. Maryland has lost those games in the past all the time. I will say 6-0 is not a unrealistic start. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped one of them. I would not expect anything worse than 5-1 though. That's all I'll say.
Okay, let's look at the second half of the season then. Does get a little bit more difficult. You host USC on October 19th. That's going to be interesting because they're coming all the way across the country to visit you. Little bit different I would say advantage Maryland, at least on that aspect of things.
Mhm.
And apparently we'll see if they can play defense. They haven't in the past. If they're going to do a shootout here, then I think Maryland's got a puncher's chance. If USC's defense is improved, this will be a huge game for you guys, especially you guys are 6-0, and let's say USC's 4-2 or something, literally could knock them out of the playoff, and then all of a sudden people are talking about Maryland in a completely different light. And then you go on the road, back-to-back games. You have Minnesota, and then 1 week later, 2 weeks later, so you get a bye, and then you're going all the way across country to Eugene, Oregon. That will be incredibly interesting for you as well. Then you finish the season on the at home against Rutgers, which, mind you, this is a Rutgers team, given their schedule and given how many guys have returned. This is a Rutgers team that might have at this point 7, 8, maybe even 9 wins, believe it or not. So this, like, they're a sleeper to get in the college football playoff simply because of their schedule. And then you host Iowa, and then you finish off at Penn State. So that, yes, Michael, you to get back to what you were saying, the second half of the schedule is where's all the meat is on that bone. What's your floor? So we're talking worst case scenario, and then what's your ceiling? What's the best case scenario in your mind for Locksley and the Terps this year, Michael?
Ceiling is 8-4. That's the best case scenario. They drop games to USC, Oregon, Penn State, and then one other. The floor is 6-6. They dropped some games early on in the non-conference, maybe against Michigan State that they shouldn't, and they start dropping games in the conference slate. My expectation for them, somewhere in the middle, probably 7-5. That pattern of them dropping games they shouldn't, I believe that's probably going to arise again. Also, I look at that early schedule up until USC, and there's a lot of winnable games that can really cement this team to be bowl eligible pretty early on. I do want to say it's refreshing to see them not play Rutgers in the last game of the season. They're playing Penn State this year. Usually we get Rutgers as that rivalry week game, so that's pretty fun to see.
Gotcha. Would you consider Virginia more of a rival?
No.
Okay. All right. I was just curious. I was trying to throw something out there at you.
The score last year was 42-14, so that might be a one-sided rivalry for Virginia, but not for Maryland fans.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Now your floor was not very low, and your ceiling was not very high. You're pretty, like you think this team is within 2 or 3 games no matter what.
It's very much a retooling year for Locksley and the staff. They're very much looking forward to 2025, 2026, when that 2025 recruiting class has some experience.
Sam, how about you, man? What's your floor and what's your ceiling?
Yeah, Mike hangs right around the middle. I'm going to give a little bit more drastic opinions because I think floor and ceiling, this is like, everything goes wrong. Floor, I'm going to say 5-7.
Okay.
I think this team could very easily lose 6 straight games in the back half of the schedule and then drop one of those early season games to Michigan State or Virginia, Northwestern, whatever it may be. Typically, momentum carries in college football, and momentum doesn't help when you're playing 3 ranked teams within 4 weeks and add, USC, who's also ranked. So I wouldn't be surprised if they drop 6 straight there towards the back half. Ceiling, though, I'm going to say 9-3. I think that if everything goes right, you start 6-0, and I'm flying out to Oregon for that game, and that game is almost a guaranteed loss for Maryland. I mean, you can chalk it up. Oregon, I think, is going to win the Big Ten. They're very, very good. Maryland hasn't beaten Penn State in a stadium full of actual people. I think you probably can chalk that one up to a loss, and then one other along the way. Other than that, I think the season, I hate giving hyperbolic takes, but the season almost comes down to USC. If Maryland wins that game, like you said, USC could easily enter that game 4-2. They play Penn State the week before. That is a huge game because if Maryland can win that, you follow that up with a win against Minnesota maybe, you head into Oregon where even if you lose that game, you've pretty much solidified yourself with a chance at 9 wins. And I think that this team has a chance to do that. Not based necessarily, I don't think this is Locksley's most talented team, but this is easily Locksley's, most winnable schedule per se, especially in the front half of the year. So I think, realistic outcome where I see this team finishing, I think, I agree with Mike. 7-5, 8-4 is kind of where I'm landing. But I think this season has a very wide variety of outcomes.
Yeah, I can see where you guys are coming from with that. Okay, so that being said, and you've already given your expectations and things. One fun question I didn't prep you guys for before you head out of here. You tell everybody where they can find you. If one were to come to Maryland to see a football game, where is one destination they absolutely have to visit or otherwise it is a complete wasted trip.
Oh boy. Okay, can I
And
hedge?
don't tell me what. Don't say Washington
I was
D.C.
gonna hedge a little bit and say DC.
No, don't give me Washington D.C. because come
Okay,
on, man.
I'll say Looney's Bar and Pub is a great place.
Did he take your answer, Michael?
I was about to say Looney's. Yeah.
It has, it's that
Why
classic.
Looney's?
It's that classic Irish. Now I feel like I'm a spokesperson for Looney's. It's that classic Irish pub. Has a million TVs, outdoor patio, great food. You can get, if you like crab and you're coming to Maryland, you better like crab. Delicious crab dip. Some of the best food in College Park you can find, and it's a great place to catch a game. You'll often see a ton of visiting fans come there. Check it out. So I would say Looney's is the spot to go.
All right,
We
Looney's
love
Pub.
Looney's so much that we do our fantasy football draft there.
Yes.
At this point, Looney's better be like they better become a sponsor for Under the Shell
I'm telling
podcast,
you,
man. Come on,
Come on,
call them
man.
up, Looney's. All
I need
right.
that.
There you go. So if anybody's going out to Maryland this year, head on over to Looney's. If you're a Maryland fan, let me know in the chat below. What's the go-to at Looney's? What's the dish? Sam says, hey, get you some crab legs. They got great dipping sauces. I'm a sucker for seafood. I like lobster more myself. I know that's kind of
Okay.
an oddity to say to some people, but it's a little bit more on my price range, I think, than crab legs are sometimes. But
That's a good play.
yeah, and I won't sit here and tell you guys that Red Lobster is like a good seafood place because I would not do that to you guys. But I am from Ohio, so it's not like you got to go up to Lake Erie. If you go up to Lake Erie, it's all about perch, right?
Yes.
You're not gonna get the crab legs at Lake Erie. Guys, where can they find Under the Shell podcast and anything else you guys would like to pitch at this time? Let everybody know. And if they're a Maryland fan, where can they follow you at?
Yeah, definitely. You can find us on all your platforms, Spotify, Apple, at Under the Shell Pod. Tons of exciting content coming your way. We've interviewed a multitude of people, Maryland legends like Mike Loxley, Ralph Friedgen, Brenda Fries, players even too. So check us out there. Social's the same spot, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. My personal Twitter is at Sam_Jane230. I'll be covering the Maryland football team for the Diamondback, which is the school paper, and Mike can do his thing because he's just as talented as anybody in the Maryland school. So
you can follow me on Twitter at Mike P. Howes, and then come to the Diamondback, read Sam's football coverage, and then read about some of the recruits that are coming in. I'll be covering the recruiting beat this fall, and then in the spring it's baseball time. So I'll be covering the baseball team this spring for the Diamondback too. So
and make sure you check out the Ohio podcast because the Buckeyes, as an outsider, the Buckeyes are loaded, man. It's going to be fun to watch from the Big Ten this year. So, from Michigan, but I do like to see a talented Big Ten. So I extend my fortitudes out to Buckeye Nation for hopefully what'll be a really, really exciting conference race. I'm super fired up for football season.
So, Sam, are you a Maryland fan or are you a Michigan fan?
I got to keep that independent journalism. I'm not a fan of anybody. I'm going to hedge my bet.
Oh, come on. Hey, listen.
I will say it's when Maryland has played Michigan in prior years, it's been roll terps. So.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Okay, all right. Hey, listen, when you're a fan podcast like myself, it doesn't matter, man. You just throw that. I went to journalism school. I know all about that stuff. I understand etiquette in the press box, but listen, I cover it from home, baby. So
right.
I get to yell and scream and at the coaches and TV and you name it. So that's how we're rolling over here at the OHIO podcast. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really do appreciate this. Have a great season, guys.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, and we want to thank Michael and Sam for coming on the OHL podcast and being with us. Two good dudes who are definitely going to go places in this industry after they graduate from Maryland. All right, Chris, let's take a look at the Maryland offense and defense as we pull over our Lads page. And let's start with the offense first. They welcome in 5 transfers, including left tackle Isaiah Wright, center Josh Kaltenberger, right guard Alu Bash, and right tackle Alan Heron. That's 4 incoming offensive lineman off the transfer portal. They also take on quarterback MJ Morris, but don't sleep on Billy Edwards or any of these other guys at the quarterback position. Of course, the one name you do need to be cognizant of, that would be the running back Roman Henby, who's back for his redshirt junior year. One of the better backs in the conference, but given that offensive line, I think he's going to find the running lanes to be a little difficult. And then at the wide receiver position, they do have some upperclassmen there in Caden Prather, Tay Felton, and Octavian Smith Jr. Chris, your thoughts on this offensive roster here from the Maryland Terrapins in 2024?
Well, I'll tell you, it tells me the fact that they had to bring in 4 starters on their offensive line tells me that the depth's not real good at that position. This is a team that's going to depend on, can that offensive line gel and can they stay healthy? Because it's a team that's going to need to be, a decent running team. MJ Morris, not a bad quarterback. I don't know that he's a Big Ten caliber quarterback. I also don't know how well he'll do behind that offensive line. But here's the big thing. If you can get your run game going, Roman Henby can take a whole lot of pressure off of MJ Morris and, make people think a little bit more. Then you can get a play action game involved, so that takes a little bit of the stress off as well. So I think the health and the gel of the offensive line is the key to whether or not this offense can do anything.
Yeah, I think you make very good points there, Chris. All right, let's take a look at the defense now. Scrolling down here on our lads, only one transfer in. It's Jalen Husky, the junior for a left cornerback. On the defensive front, you've got a senior, a sophomore, and a senior. And then at the jack position, you got another senior. So again, you've got some upperclassmen there at the linebacker position, and Caleb Wheatland and Ruben Hippolyte II and Kellen Wyatt. You've got junior, senior, junior. Again, upperclassmen. Defensive backfield, we talked about Husky already. Then you've got Fleming at the strong safety position, Trader at the free safety, Thomas at the right cornerback, and at playing nickel, senior Glendon Miller. Again, outside of Thomas, all upperclassmen. I find that incredibly interesting. Now, these are names, Chris, that aren't going to necessarily jump out at you. However, these are upperclassmen. These are mature guys. I usually like to see that on a team that maybe doesn't have a ton of flashy names or lost guys who are replacing them with more mature older guys who've been waiting their turn to get that opportunity. Seems to be the case here with Maryland. I do think defensively Maryland they're not going to get totally overwhelmed a bunch this season. I think there are some games that when we get into the schedule, I think they're going to be outmatched. But this is a team that I think can keep it close, and they got a puncher's chance at times.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I love a experienced defense, especially when you don't have a lot of big star power. But I'll tell you, I like Hippolyte a lot at linebacker, and then Dante Trader Jr., the safety, I think is a talent. These are guys. What you're going to lack maybe in that star power, you are going to make up for in maturity and leadership, and that can go a long way, especially in, like you said, the close games. So I think this is a team. They're liable to be in trouble against an Ohio State, against an Oregon. But if you are playing most of the teams in the Big Ten, I think that this defense can keep it within striking distance. And again, it just goes back to, can you score enough points?
Right. All right, let's take a look at the schedule together, Chris. So, starting off the season against UConn at home, Michigan State at home, at Virginia, home against Villanova, at Indiana. I guess if you're going to start the season off against a couple Big Ten teams, doing so against guys who have new head coaches is key. I think UConn and Villanova should be auto dubs. At Virginia is a little sneaky games there. Can they win it? Absolutely. Can they lose it? You betcha. Then they have the bye week. So taking those first 5 games, Chris, what do you think?
I think this is a Maryland team that can go out and get the 3 non-conference games. I really do. Even though it's at Virginia, I just don't see Virginia as any kind of a power team this year. I think they can go out and get those 3 non-conference. And I think that this is a team that can get Michigan State, that can get Indiana, and could very well get Northwestern. This is also a team that I think may not win a game after October 11th.
Correct.
I think that once you get past Northwestern, this is the team in a lot of trouble.
That's exactly what Michael and Sam were saying. So this is a team that could go 6-0 and then finish the season 6-6. If they do start 5-0, they better get that win against Northwestern, because after that, USC at Minnesota, at Oregon, versus Rutgers, versus Iowa, at Penn State. That's the gauntlet. Chris, you got them going 6-6 on the season. So does JR. Both of you have them 3-6. I got them going 3-9, 1-8, and I know that in the conference, and I know that is not a number that Vegas is kind of scratching their head at from me, because I think they have them at 7. I think that they think Maryland has turned a page a little bit as a program. If they're still giving them 7 wins, which is what they ended up with last year, they absolutely hit the exact number that Vegas said they would last year. I just don't see the same talent, especially on the offensive line. And I think in this conference, given the teams in this conference that are building, that a lot of them have a trajectory going upwards, they're going to be in a lot of dogfights, and you better be able to control the line of scrimmage. And if they can't, this is going to be a long season for Maryland. I don't care how much talent you have at wide receiver, how much talent you have in the backfield, how solid your defense is. If your offensive line stinks, then your season's going to stink.
One big thing they've got going for them is they miss probably 2 of the best 3 defensive lines in the conference in not playing Ohio State or that team up north. They do still have to play Oregon, which I think is going to have a pretty good defensive line.
And Penn State.
And Penn State.
And Iowa. And
Here's
USC.
The thing, Eric, and I don't want to go down this path. I think you're giving a little too much love to that Penn State defensive line. I know that you love Abdul Carter, moved down to the defensive end position, but I'm not 100% sold on the transition yet.
I know, but
he is very talented.
Again, I'm the one who during our last preview said Penn State's trending downwards right now as well.
Yeah.
They're stagnant as a program, but they're still better than Maryland.
I think that Penn State is one of those teams that Maryland could shock. I don't think. I mean, Penn State should be favored. They are a more talented team by all rights. I don't dispute that. But I also think that that's one of the teams that Maryland could shock.
All right. Well, we shall see. It's going to be a very interesting year in and around the Big Ten. One of the things I can't wait to do is after Ohio State gets their W after the 12 noon, big noon kickoff, just kicking my feet up the rest of the day and just watching football all the rest of Saturday from noon all the way until midnight. In the Big Ten. I absolutely love that. Can't wait for it, and I'm here for absolutely every bit of it this season. So let us know what you think in the comments section below. Do you agree with Chris, or do you on the same wavelength with myself that Maryland is not going to hit that 7 number or even come close to it? I'm guessing best bet based on the bet you placed there, Chris, at 6-6. You're not placing a bet on Maryland. You're staying away.
No, I'm staying away, but if I were going to lean, I would lean the under.
I'm hammering the under on this one myself. So that's what we're going to do. We'll see who's right or wrong. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. If you are a Maryland fan, by all means, go check out the Under the Shell podcast. 2 great young dudes going somewhere in this space of college podcasting. These guys are going to be absolute superstars down the road, and you can say that you were following them when they were in college. So go and do that now, guys. Hit the like button, share, subscribe, do all those great things as we continue to march towards the season. That's number 13 down. We've got 5 more to go here in just 2.5 weeks as we wrap this thing up and we get the 2024 season kicked off. Till next time, Chris, OH.
IO.